Jim Budd started a record mail order catalog called Underground Medicine back in the early 1990s out of Connecticut. It quickly became more than just that, though. It became a little scene of its own, partly due to the sometimes comical, sometimes opinionated, but always spot on descriptions of the records in his ever expanding catalog. You can tell this guy knew his rock and roll. Not only that, but a if we don't have it, you don't need it reputation quickly developed for Underground Medicine by always stocking the top notch punk, garage rock, and power pop from all around the world. Then a few years later, Jim started Rapid Pulse Records, releasing 7 inches by now legendary bands like the Basement Brats, the Crazy Squeeze, the Gaggers, Smogtown, and so many more. In time, Rapid Pulse's reputation grew as stone solid as Underground Medicine's. And now, to tell us how it all came to be and then not to be, Mr. Jim Budds.
When every day's feeling like a Monday morning, staying out late, kinda gets boring. Do what you wanna when you wanna do something now. I'm getting older by day, younger at night. I need a little something to feel alright. Yeah, do what you wanna when you wanna do something now. Yeah, you do what you wanna when you wanna do something now.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Jim? Thank you for coming on to our humble program.
Glad to be here. Humble to be here.
So let's just get right into it. Can you tell us how Underground Medicine materialized? Is it something that you set out to do, or is something that just happened out of like necessity or circumstance?
Yeah, I think it was more circumstance. I was working at a record store, Rhymes Records, 59 Broadway, New Haven, Connecticut, and so that's where I got all my records. And but then eventually, the store started going downhill, and we weren't getting the stuff in that I wanted. And a friend of mine who also worked there, at one point we got this crazy notion that we were gonna collect everything on sympathy for the record industry. So when it first started, all those records were coming in, and it was a lot of cool stuff: Lazy Cowgirls, Jeff Dahl, and Clawhammer, and all that stuff. And then gradually, it kind of there was all sorts of. They'd always put out good stuff, but mixed in was always this bizarre shit you didn't want.
There were some clunkers.
Anyways,
you can say it.
Eventually, we got up to like 200 releases, and like, this is enough. And anyways, so yeah, the store just wasn't getting stuff in, and I don't remember ever having a plan or thinking I always wanted to do this. But I guess just one day I kind of got the idea, and if I remember right, the first releases I had were from Sub Pop, because they had just put out like the Muff 7-inch and
like Gas Huffer, I think.
Yep, Gas Huffer, definitely. Mud Honey, and I remember some band called the Fuckers, which no idea what they were like, but yeah, that was an early one. And yeah, so I remember having like 5 releases from them, and maybe 10 of each or something, and put my first ad in Maximum Rock and Roll, and kind of just went from there. There was probably a few other labels I wrote to at the time or something, and a new Get Hip in Pittsburgh, because we got stuff for the store there, so I just started ordering for myself from their catalog, and yeah, so that was just basically how it started, and just kind of rolled from there.
So I think Jay kind of really hit the nail on the head in the intro. It just seems like if it wasn't in your catalog back in the day, it really wasn't worth buying. And I can't say that about most of the punk rock mailers of the 90s, but it just seemed like you were always stocking exactly the kinds of bands that I wanted to hear. It was always old school punk. It was the really cool garage stuff. It was the real rock and roll. I mean, you were into power pop way before it was cool. So how did you really come up with that sort of vision for the styles of music that you were going to cater to?
Probably just because I was just ordering what I wanted and what I listened to. So, like, the record store wasn't getting the stuff in anymore that I wanted. So, I was just getting them for myself, really. And, and so I'd order a bunch of copies for other people too. And, yeah, so I remember going through Maximum reviews each month and seeing, oh, that looks cool, and there'd be a address on there, so just write to them, hey, can I get some of your records? And yeah, there wasn't any grand plan of oh, we're gonna have the old school punk in the garage, and it just kind of, well, that's what I was into, so that's what I went for. And the power pop stuff, I was always into, the Romantics and just all the records and just all the old school stuff. And so when newer bands were coming out too, I just went for those too, and just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because, I'd say like 80% of the reason I used to buy Maxim Rock and Roll were for the reviews, and then like 20% for the columns. But then after your catalog grew to pretty much like the streamlined version of the record reviews in MRR, I stopped buying MRR. Like, what do I need this for? I gotta grab medicine. There's nothing to. So
yeah, well, one thing I always tried to do was like write my own reviews of the records, and because I'd see other probably as it moved along a little farther, I'd get catalogs from other mail orders and stuff. Most of them just listed exactly what the label said that was selling them. Like, whatever, if Estrus said, this Mono Men single, whatever, it sounds just like the Sonics or something, I'd always try and write something else. And, generally try and keep it positive if I could, because I wanted to sell it. And, but generally I was into all the stuff anyway, so it wasn't that tough.
Yeah. And then after, because I remember when your catalogs were like one sheet and then like 2 or 3 sheets and then a booklet. But after a while, I could kind of pick out what you liked and what you were just, like you said, just being positive.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I could see that there was probably a little code to break. And, yeah, because at first, it was just one sheet folded up and put into an envelope.
Yeah.
And eventually it became like a catalog of sorts.
Yeah, and I remember the glorious day when you guys started taking credit cards.
Oh,
that was a whole new level right there.
Definitely, because that was one of the hardest things. Was what I'd get the catalog would go out, and then the next week I'd get like a stack of envelopes in the mail, and then you go through the first ones, and everybody wants the new Humper single. So you get the first 10 letters, and 9 of them wanted, first 10 orders, 9 of them wanted that Humper single. So then the next day you get 8 more orders, and of course one wants the Humpers, and they're all gone. So you have to tell, did they list alternatives? Do I give credits or that? And then when the credit card came in, it made it a lot easier. Just charge whatever I had, and didn't have to worry about that stuff. And because at first it wasn't even email. It was just
Right. Yeah, you had to like
you just
send
mail
your
it out
stuff.
and get the
Yeah.
letters back in the mail and send the records. And I remember putting $4 cash back in the envelope because something was out of stock and whatnot, or writing up on little index cards. You have whatever, $8 credit, and stamping it with my return address stamp, and that was
The
it.
good old days. The good old days of $4 7-inches.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
So
even better, because I remember, and I guess in the earliest days, it was I'd buy them for $2 postpaid and then sell them for $3.25. So, and then I think the ones that I get from like a distributor were like $2.50 each plus the shipping. So then I'd sell those for $4, and then most of the imports would end up being $5, and that was nice.
yeah. So do you think it's possible for somebody to start a mail order catalog like Underground Medicine today? Stocking like what you did from all over the place.
I would imagine so, but I mean, I don't even know really how. I mean, I'm sure you'd have to be on social media doing all that stuff and promoting yourself somehow. And then I'm not even sure now, as far as distributors, if there are any that still get stuff from all around the world that can one stop from there and get a whole bunch of things. Or I'm sure it's doable, but it might be a bit tougher, yeah. And just the cost factor. When you're buying 10 singles from a band you never heard of and they cost $2.50 each, well, what's that, $25. So, but now if it costs you $5.50 each, you're talking a lot of money putting out, and if they don't sell, then you're stuck.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I think like Tom from Deadbeat still has his going. I get his emails all the time still, and so I'm sure there's a way new people could do it. Might be easier if you could really hyper focus in on something like or the anti-scene and cock noose, or the Confederacy of Scum bands. If you were like became the guy who carried all that stuff and people went to you for that, I mean, couldn't be a full-time job, but you might be able to be the person who carried that kind of thing, or whatever it is, Japanese death metal or something, whatever. But to have an overall thing would definitely be tough. But I imagine it's doable if you have the energy and
the startup.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I think there's lots of these labels that have web stores and they sell stuff. It's just nothing as cool as Underground Medicine in terms of the kind of bands that they have. I mean, there is definitely a void there that could be filled. Although I guess Deadbeat is pretty similar.
That's the closest thing I can think of.
Yeah, I think that is pretty close. And yeah, he does still faithfully send out his updates, his emails, and still holding up for the old school punk.
Yeah.
So you were doing Underground Medicine for about 5 years before you launched Rapid Pulse Records, and then it was awesome.
Right.
And so what was it that finally inspired you to say, hey, I'm going to start my own label?
Well, I remember Richie from Screaming Apple Records in Germany. this was, yeah, because I think I got the computer in 97, which is when the label started. So I was finally had a lot more easy contact with people through email, and especially overseas people. And he was like, "Oh, why don't you have a label?" And I was like, I don't know. I got my hands full here, work full time, and then do underground medicine the rest of the time. And he was like, "Oh, because I have a 7-inch. The Basement Brats want to put out a US 7-inch," and I maybe I thought about it for a while, and or what exactly happened. I don't think I just like, yeah, let me do it, but I don't even remember. Who knows? It could have been. But I remember in the meantime, Apocalypse Babies just wrote me a letter, and they was like, "Hey, we want to put this out on your label." And I got him. I was like, "Well, I don't have a label." And so I don't know. One thing led to another, and it was like, "Yeah, we'll give this a shot." And yeah, it went from there. And yeah, it ended up Apocalypse Babies was the first one, and that they didn't have email, so that was all done by letters.
Oh,
Maybe I
man.
spoke to him like once or something, but
So, if you were allowed to submit one rapid pulse release to the Library of Congress Music Preserve, which one record would it be? Sophie's choice, Jim.
yeah. Well, I'm thinking probably just the New York comp, just because it's like a specific scene in a specific time, and more of an artifact of something that was going on rather than just a random record. So then even if you like one out of every 5 songs or something, it's still, yeah, this happened at the time. And so I would think that would probably be my choice. Otherwise, I don't know, just would be kind of random to pull something else out. There's nothing that says, "Oh, this one has to be archived for posterity." Anything really. I don't know.
It's like the 90s punk scene was a really interesting time because there was this amazing like international scene of bands, but a lot of people in the United States didn't really know about any of this because it's really hard to get any of these bands' records. And that's the one thing I always thought was super cool about underground medicine is I could always find these bands from Italy and Spain and France. And so if I was going to get into bands like that, it was usually stuff I bought from you. And then you really kind of carried that over to Rapid Pulse, where you had a lot of bands from England and mainland Europe. Was that something that you were intentionally thinking about, was kind of being an international record label?
Probably not at first, but once yeah, it turned out the first 2 releases were England and Norway. I just thought, yeah, let's keep trying to go to a bunch of different countries, and because the thing was, looking back on it, it probably wasn't the best business model, but because at the time, you had labels like Bag of Hammers, Get Hip, who else, Empty, and a bunch of those labels, and they all they all had like their Humper single, they all had their Devil Dog single, they all had Newbound Turks and Teen Generate and Headcoats. And so I was like, well, I kind of want to be different than that. So yeah, I'll just go a different way. I mean, in looking back, it would be, yeah, I'd love to say out of my first 10 releases, 5 of them were some of my favorite bands of all time. But, and 2, I was like, well, it would be awesome to get a Teen Generate or Humper single to put out, but, they already have 8, 10 singles out. So I'll be number 11, which is cool, but I guess I'd rather be the first to put out a sellouts record or something. And I just like the idea of yeah, I don't know why really at the time, but I just thought it was cool to do a lot of the foreign releases, and which again probably wasn't the best business model. As it would be, that's one thing the label never really had, was a band that you put out the record and they're like, you give them their copies, however 50 copies or 100 copies, whatever they were getting, and then like, oh, we're going on tour, we need another 50, and then halfway through the tour, hey, we're sold out, we need more. Like,
Oh man.
nothing like that ever happened. So it was mostly bands that stuck to their hometown pretty much, and, or their area anyway, let's say. So, but yeah, so it wasn't, I guess, a grand plan or anything. It just kind of happened, and then just moved into some U.S. bands after that.
It was cool because I remember when they were bands from like overseas, a lot of times it was like really sketchy, ordering stuff from like, Incognito or like, gosh, was it Wallabies or 1+2? And because you're like,
Yeah,
you had to like blindly send your check, but and then it would come like a month later, but it's like, you having, a lot of those bands on your label or your mail order was always cool because like, oh, it's Jim and he's just, in Connecticut, and the shipping's way cheaper, and it's a little more trustworthy.
That was cool because when a lot of the labels started sprouting up, like Hate Records in Italy or Alien Snatch, and or were they Germany? I forget.
Alien Snatch,
But,
yeah,
yeah, and just a lot of those labels, Incognito and stuff like that, and so I'd want to get their records, but they wanted stuff I had, so we were able to trade, and that would keep the prices down because it wasn't just having to send hundreds of dollars to Italy and wait for a month or whatever to get the records. So yeah, that was really cool once all that started happening, and then when the Scandinavian stuff, helicopters and Glucifer and all that, which I wasn't the biggest fan of. I mean, I like a lot of those records. I'm thinking of the Turpentines I liked a lot, and some other stuff, but they were all they all had really nice sleeves, and so, and people bought them, so I always, I was able to get that. And then once some label in Germany sees you're selling some records from somebody else in Switzerland and stuff, they contact you and say, do you want their stuff? And I'm like, oh yeah. And again, it just kind of snowballs from there.
That's cool, man. Like a little community.
Yeah, it was.
So I'm determined to ask every label owner this question because I don't know why, it just fascinates me. But so out of all the bands that you worked with, was there ever the one band you wish you would have put out a record by and just didn't for whatever reason?
Well, I definitely wanted a Firestarter record and definitely tried to get them, but I think they were just kind of gun shy after Teen Generate. They just, I don't know if they got super selective on who they were dealing with, or I think they felt they got burned a few too many times or something. And yeah, so they were careful, and they were like, yeah, we like what you do or whatever, but nothing really came from it. I tried with them for a while, but yeah, it just wasn't going to happen. And of course, the big one that I always wanted, which I ended up getting at least a split 7-inch, was the Stitches. And yeah, from the first time, from the time the label started, I was after those guys to do something. And then, you know, they had a short time where they were putting out a bunch of stuff. And after that, there was like, they were still out there playing, but they weren't putting any music out. And so it just ended up years later getting lucky and getting an old track from the vaults, and it was a killer song too. So I was, yeah, that totally
ended up.
I was majorly happy with that one.
I still remember in your car when you're like, listen to this and tell me what you think. And it was
really?
that Stitches song. Yeah, it was that Stitches song. I'm like, that's awesome. And you're like, that's a Stitches song I'm putting out on the record.
Oh, wow. I totally forgot about that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So that was a big one. I know there were other bands that I got turned down by, but nothing that really sticks out that I can even remember, you know, that was like, oh, really disappointed or anything. Most bands were pretty receptive, and they were like, yeah, well, we'll do something, or, you know. So I have no regrets there, really.
Cool.
I think for most people of my generation and Jay's generation, we always kind of associate Underground Medicine with like this awesome period of time for like punk rock, like kind of mid 90s into early 2000s, and all of these incredible bands. So are there like a couple of like favorite bands from that era that stand out to you personally?
Off the top of my head, I go with the Briefs. I think they were 99, maybe they came out 2000 in that area, and they yeah, and everything they pretty much did was one single after the next and one album after the next. I thought everything they did was great, and even their reunion or whatever you call it from a few years back, I thought was really good. So they're a band I definitely still go back to all the time from that era. Yeah, and who else? Smogtown, definitely. Smogtown from that era, and a lot of the stuff Hostage was putting out, I liked a lot. I was just thinking that my wife Debbie, she'd definitely be saying the Newtown Animals, because I always associated them with the Briefs, because they were right at the same time, and she was totally into them. And, but I mean, there's a ton, like the Demonics, always liked them, and the Marked Men, and just, I mean, if you rattled off a bunch of names, I'd be like, oh yeah, they were great. They were great. You know? And Boris the Sprinkler, I was listening to them the other day, and for some reason in my mind, they were like a pop punk band. But when I played the records a few weeks ago, I was like, no, they're not a pop punk band at all, really. They're just straight ahead. And yeah, so I always liked them. And well, that was maybe a little earlier than 2000, but I don't know. Just, you know, a ton of stuff.
Yeah, I always thought Boris the Sprinkler were like one of I still do. I think they're one of the most underrated bands of that era. You know, it's like I think they belong right up there with all those other. You know, I know they released like that one 7-inch on Lookout, but gosh, they deserve right up to be there. With all the Screeching Weasels and the Mr. T Experiences and the
Yeah, definitely.
Vindictives, and you know, they're great. And in fact, I think the only reason, like one of the main reasons why I started Audio Ammunition was to interview Rev Norb.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And
Yeah.
he should have been a star.
Oh yeah, dude.
You
Oh
know?
yeah.
I remember the first time we saw them was in New York, and they were opening for the Lunatics. I think it was the first time we saw them at and yeah, I remember Norb came out and he had like utensils, knives and forks on his like making Freddy Krueger hands. And I remember these girls were there probably to see the Lunatics, I guess, and had no idea what was going on, and they were just giggling and laughing when it was hysterical. It was great. So
I remember when he used to come out in that Wolverine like that Wolverine costume, but it wasn't. It was like a little kid's like Wolverine costume.
Right.
It sucks because I remember when I finally did talk to him for Audio Ammunition. I said something about, gosh, yeah, I wish you guys would have come to Arizona, and he said we did. He said we came to Arizona a couple times. I'm like,
oh really?
Yeah, wow. And I totally missed it. I didn't even know about it. So, I'm gonna do a wild card question here because Josh is always a good dude in this respect. I mean, he's in a lot of respects, but he always puts like some extra questions just in case. And one of his questions is actually really good. And I hope you don't mind, Jim. But in 2003, you released the Nikki Corvette 7-inch. And this was her first release since 1980. And of course, she went on to release a lot of records since then. But how did that single come about?
It had to be through Travis Rahman, and from the Short Fuses and Minneapolis, and I forget if I must have known him before because he had ordered records and stuff for a while, and I'm guessing from what I can remember, even he was just like, hey, I'm working with Nikki Corvette, and would you be interested in doing a record? And I'm like, yeah, sure, of course. And it was really cool because we went out to L.A. Me and Debbie went out to L.A. and we met up with Nikki. This was before the record came out, and because we met her at work, she was working at Barney's Beanery on Santa Monica Boulevard. So we just went in there for lunch, and she was our waitress. So we just talked to her about it all, and she was so excited and everything. And we were like, yeah, we can't wait to do this. And yeah, and it just kind of went from there. It was like, yeah, they sent me the tracks, and the next thing you know, her big comeback record was out. And so yeah, that was really cool, and that was one of the fastest sellers and stuff. I don't know if either of you guys have it, because the first 100 copies, I forget if it was pink or red vinyl, but I had her autograph like 20 or 30 of them from customers who I knew would buy it. So it would be like, oh, hi Jay, love Nikki Corvette or something. I did that for like 20 or 30 of them. She was totally into that, and that was really cool. And luckily everybody I suspected would buy it did. So
I don't know. I'm gonna go look though, because if it is, maybe I didn't
I mean,
notice.
it might not even have been like 20 or there might have, who knows? It might have been 10 or 15. It was probably at least 15. But yeah, that was definitely something we did. That was fun.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Josh had another question. He wrote another question about a Rapid Pulse release.
Yeah, my favorite Rapid Pulse record is actually 2 records because it was the Inversions double 7-inch, 2 separate 7-inch releases. And I mean, the Prostitutes are, probably in my mind the greatest punk band of kind of that late 90s time period. And this was kind of in between versions of the Prostitutes that Kevin did the Inversions, and those 2 records
And they're from your neck of the woods?
Yes,
Harrisburg near
yeah,
you?
yeah. The Harrisburg, PA, is where the Prostitutes were from.
Yeah.
And then I guess Kevin was based in Ohio at the time that he did the Inversions, and to Hunk by the Phone and Domestic Disturbance. So how'd you end up doing like 2 separate 7-inches? Like, was that ever going to be an EP or something? That kind of neat how that turned out.
I'm sure we talked about it. Like a double single or maybe even a 10-inch or something. But again, the memory fails. So how it actually came about that we did 2, I'm not sure. I know Kevin, he was another customer. He used to buy stuff, and I'm pretty sure he just sent me, must have been a CD. Yeah, a CD at that point with like 4-6 songs on it, I guess. Yeah, there's 3 on each, I think. And he was like, hey, would you want to put this out? And I don't know, just going back and forth and stuff, somehow we decided, 2 singles. Because, I love that stuff, too. And Jamie from the Sleazies did the artwork and made it so they're kind of like companion pieces. They look the same, but different colors and stuff. And that, we can put that in the what was it, the Library of Congress, if you want. But no, that was, and I think all those songs hold up too, I'd say. Every once in a while I'll go on Discogs and just to check out the Rapid Pulse releases, and most of them are still, $4 here, near mint, and $4. And so if anybody's listening and wants to find them, they're definitely readily available. A lot of them, anyway.
Just because they haven't, just wait. There'll come a time. The time will come. I'm sure it will. So let me ask you this, Jim: Is there you ever think about Underground Medicine or Rapid Pulse revival?
Well, right now, definitely not Underground Medicine. It's just way too much work, and I don't have the energy really to put into it. And Rapid Pulse, I never say it's a done deal, because something could pop up and I'd be totally into it. The idea of putting out more records is I'm still totally up for it, but just the way things are now too, with the big vinyl resurgence, and because if a band now sends you their songs and are like, hey, do you want to put this out, and be like, yeah, let's do it, and then it's like, well, you got to be willing to wait like 10 months before the record plant can get the records back to us and stuff, and you sure you're still going to be together then, and so that part of it, I don't. The getting the record out there, having the finished product, yeah. But as far as the wait times and all this got, you always see. I get emails all the time for bands or labels taking pre-orders for this record or that, and a month later, it's like, well, it looks like it's delayed 2 months now, and that stuff I have no interest in dealing with, really. But who knows? Maybe things will change on that front. But at the same time, if something I was really into came up, and I'm sure I'd be willing. Yeah.
Hear that, ladies and gentlemen who are listening?
Yeah, send your demo tapes my way, and I'll be.
Well, so while we're on the subject, what's the best, if someone wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best place?
Well, I still have the same email from 1997, which is umedpunk@aol.com. So that's and the website Underground Medicine is still there. It rarely ever changes, but you can go there, and I'm sure there's a link to the email and so forth. If anybody did want to get in touch, that's by far the easiest way. Yeah.
Cool. So let me ask you a sub question to the last one. So we interviewed Lou from Rumbar Records, and he is like really behind the CD, like it's CD singles and cassettes are kind of starting to make a comeback. Do you ever think about maybe doing something like that instead of like a vinyl?
No. I couldn't imagine it, really. I don't know. I mean, maybe if you found a band I was really into and wanted to put out an album and then do it both on LP and CD, I could see something like that. But yeah, I don't know. In the cassette thing, I just don't get at all. And did that die with Burger Records?
Yeah, I think so. I think they buried it along with Burger, those Burger pervs.
Right. So I don't know. And what did you say? Rumbar Records? Because I know I've heard a lot of cool things on that, and I had no idea they were like doing CD singles and stuff. Though
yeah, it's almost all CDs.
Seems crazy, but who knows? Maybe it must be working for them.
It's because people our age buying the CDs.
Wow.
Yeah, people old enough to remember that putting out cassettes is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, no, he swears by that he says that they sell really well. So
and I'm sure CDs are coming back. They'll be the next big retro thing or something, and everybody who's sold off all their CDs will just be like all the people who sold their records and then buying them all back again. They'll be doing it again with the CDs, I'm sure. Or at least that's what the record companies plan on having you do.
Yeah.
The major record companies, So
yeah,
but yeah, that's awesome if it's working for them. Didn't they do like the Yum Yums?
Yeah, he released Yum Yums in USA.
Okay. I know I've heard a bunch of other things. So.
Well, cool, man. I don't want to take any more of your time. I know it's late where you guys are at. So I just want to, you don't go yet. I'll just end this live and we can chat a little bit more after. But I just want to say thank you for coming on, man. It was great to see you again. And you're welcome back anytime if ever you want to come back and hang out.
Oh, of course. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. And And my wife definitely had to tell me, "Oh, you got to work wildlife in the conversation somehow." So
I remember she's a big fan.
yeah, totally. So yeah, she's emailed back and forth with the singer and stuff a bunch, and yeah, she's. Well, I mean, I like them a lot too, but she's over the moon with them. So
Oh, yeah, they're great. Does she like Rumbler or Rambler, whatever?
I don't even know what that is.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. If she likes what, check out like Spaghetti Town Records. I bet she'd like a lot of that stuff that's on there.
Oh, all right.
So, all right, man. Well, sorry, I don't mean to end it in like on a thing, but if Josh has anything to say, or
We were just really excited to get you on. This was like one of our dream guests, so I think we feel like we've pulled it off.
yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
We actually had people asking about you too. We're like, yeah, we're getting them on. It's in the works.
That's awesome. I mean, I really appreciate it because, yeah, like I said, on disc, if you look on Discogs, it's kind of discouraging. You see 20 copies of sale of the Double Nothings or something. I'm like, come on, that's a great record. Why? And then some record I want to buy costs 30. I'm like, well, what's the deal here? You know? But that's always nice to hear, yeah, and I appreciate it.
Of course, man. Anytime.